Hey, friends and students, laymen, initiates, all of you interested in this course. Pardon me from the delay. I am still in a experimenting mode of this channel. So I will simply continue from where I dropped in the last video. Okay. And I ask you for a little patience until we can get things technically right and round, because I'm still operating on my own. Okay, so I thank you for your patience. Well, then let's go. I was talking about St. Brendan uh, being a navigator whose activities, even though they are inserted in Roman Christianity after its takeover of Ireland, at least partial takeover. Okay, many people argue that Ireland, as Ethiopia, and now a comment of mine, two cultures that are poetically based, cultures which people, the entire collective of people, are basically poets. Okay, they were not entirely taken over by European colonial powers. Okay, so even though Christianity has taken had its grip over Ireland through Saint Patrick and Saint Columba, this is only a partial grip, which means that the earlier foundations coming from the Maggae, the Druids, the Aria, okay, the earlier nobility and the magical deities known as the Tuatha De Dananns uh, still are the provenance of the foundations in which Saint Brendan has based his life, his mission, and all of his voyages. Okay, well, so we pick it up from the term bre, right, which means beautiful, and the etymology of his name is Brenna in. Okay, so bre or Brenna has to do with beautiful, and in has to do with the sun, or Finn, right, which is one of the Gaelic names of the sun, and also the term Dan, which has to do with the Tuatha De Dananns. Okay, uh, I don't think that these are mere coincidences. Okay, but of course, in a Christian context, this will not be emphasized. Okay, and that's okay, because we understand that the Holy See and Roman Christianity are truly influential powers that truly have reshaped Ireland, and in a lesser way, of course, not totally, but all the other colonized countries by Christianity have been entirely reshaped and retransfigurated by this influence. Okay, well, so in the case of Saint Brendan, right? Um, the point is that the long experience that was inherited by Saint Brendan, beside his monastic education and all of his experience as as a part of the clerical society, uh, this impetus to sail the sea, and risk and go for adventures and reach remote isles such as High Brazil, and and many other isles. If one wants to research St. Brendan's voyage, is a very rich itinerary. Okay, even to Iceland. Okay, so this impetus of sailing and traveling, it has to do with this long tradition of the Fenians, okay, and the earlier traditional sail culture from Ireland that, according to Conor McGarry, has propagated the what would be considered the true Magian form of Christianity, as McGarry says, out of the Maggian priesthood of Iesa Kriost. Okay, so the root term for Jesus Christ is Gaelic in its ancestry in an earlier phase, from Isa, the sun, okay, or Iesa, and Kriost, which simply means oil, okay. So uh, this earlier tradition of salesman and sea voyage is for sure backed by Saint Brennan's experience, okay, and even the famous voyage to High Brazil is just as it was famous in the contemporary maps at his time, which was used by all kinds of salesmen and all sorts of prominent salesmen already under the Holy See and secret societies such as the Knights of Malta or the Knights Templars, like Vasco da Gama, Cabral, and Vespuccio. They all knew St. Brennan as a stellar navigator of the oceans, as a main reference, okay? And the island of High Brazil was considered to be uh, a paradisiacal island in which Brennan and his crew has reached in a previous time before the Holy See colonizing voyages, okay, by Columbus, Cabral, Vespuccio, and Vasco da Gama. So this legend of High Brazil was already known. It was known as a legendary paradisiacal kind of island of extreme beauty with some magical features. So, in other words, they used to say that the isle kind of disappeared uh, from 7 to 7 years. Okay, it was a sort of a mystical island that was not always ready and available. Okay, it was considered to what the earlier Celtic, Druidical, or Gaelic culture would refer as otherworldly paradises, which means that it was related to fairies, the fairy folk, which in Gaelic is known as the Sheed, okay? And also it was considered to be uh, inhabited by a sort of a druid, right? Or a wizard or a magician, right? And to be accessible only by those that are pure-hearted. So Saint Brendan, as a Christian monk, following the whole Fenian Arcadian tradition of Mylenia, succeeded in reaching this island, okay, and truly became a visitor that has supposedly landed there, okay, and made a whole inspection, encountered this wizard that spoke ancient lost language for today that could be considered Gaelic, okay, and also in this island and another set of islands that he voyaged to, he had encounter with sovereign groups of women, okay. So this is very important to point out that earlier Celtic, so-called Celtic or Gaelic Irish traditions, the fairy folk and and womanly group were considered to be highly autonomous and empowered by their own right. Okay, so we're not talking about the typical patriarchal civilization. Okay, no, we're talking about a culture where women and and fairies and all of these sorts of groups were actually empowered enough to um, to make their existence independent from men's rules. Okay, right. So this is a very important context of St. Brendan's voyage, and that the island of High Brazil figured as um, a very famous paradisiacal land that was so influential in the collective imaginary of salesmen, of the aristocratic elites, that to the point that it was considered to be a an island conquered by Saint Brendan's voyage on a sort of uh, paradisiacal conquest. Okay, so anyway, this is of the highest importance. Okay, now, um, well, my friends, I apologize. Okay, because as I told you, I am still in an experimental mode. So some of the slides that are being exposed, they exceed this lecture in particular, this 30-40 minute lecture. Okay, so I apologize for that, but they will be used in further lectures. Okay, so I think that my exposition with the present correct slides make clear the limits that we are delimiting. These are actually technical problems, okay, that do not synchronize the lectures and the slides with perfection, simply because of my technical limitations, okay. So I am a teacher and anthropologist, but I also had to learn the whole procedure more or less alone, okay, with some help, but it's still not in perfect shape. But it will also not harm anyway, it will not damage in any way our course. Okay, so one more point that I want to explain to you is that the term cathedral, right, in Gaelic translates as battling the druids, okay, which means cathedri, battling the druids, right? For example, in the famous Battle of Moyturan in the times of in the Maggian times, uh, uh, when the Tuatha Danans were fully active, okay, and pioneering, the term Kaf means battle. So the Battle of Moyturan or Kafdri would mean battling the Druids. Well, what this means is very simple but very important. Between the transition of Christianity, no, the transition from the Maggian times, where the dolmens, the cromlechs, and the megaliths were the um, the structures residing in the power spots, okay, that were carefully chosen by the druids as spots in which converging ley lines of energy took place, so the magi could perform their true function at the time, which was, in a simple analogy, performing a sort of acupunctural healing over the earth. So the domes, the cromlechs, the megaliths were aligned with these ley lines. They were centered in the ley lines of the earth and also aligned with the stars. Okay, and we're not gonna talk too much about the stars, but for sure, uh, two constellations that were very influential, among others, were the Ursa Minor constellation and the Pleiades. Okay, So uh, what happened is when Christianity took over with Saint Patrick and Saint Columba, they simply appropriated the power spots where the dolmens, the cromlechs, and other megalithic circles and structures were built, okay, to basically now reverse the function from a healing and a performance of heal through the earth grid now to a controlling and imperialistic kind of function, which is basically to control the the collective of peoples, right? And establish a vertical hierarchy based on the saints, and above the saints, the Holy Father, and the Christian Trinity, and finally the concept of deity, not anymore as the Maggian deities of the past, but now of the the demiurgic concept of deity. Okay, right. Of course, this concept of demiurge is derived from the Nag Hammadi library, which we're not gonna enter now. Okay, but it's more of a controlling imperialistic kind of modality. Okay, so simply what happened is that the Holy See, the saints, and their ecclesiastical hierarchy took over the power spots where the dolmens, the cromlechs, and the megaliths were reside, and built their temples on the top. Okay, building their temples on the top, they had access to the earth grid now as a controlling endeavor, as a controlling um, um, enterprise. Okay, and that's basically what the temple of the temples and the cathedrals are all about. We could include this with an analysis of the symbology, the terms, and the architecture of the cathedrals, but we will leave this for a later event, okay, which is very interesting. So any one of you that have this interest, we could go on this and simply deconstruct the temples and the cathedrals while making an analysis of the architecture, of the symbology, and of the terminology related to really show and prove without the shadow of a doubt their true function, uh, deriving from the past when they took over. Okay, so uh, pardon me. The true function of the Holy See as an imperial corporative religion was to reverse the earth grid into a controlling operation through the ley lines, through the power spots, to basically maintain the control of the collective, and also perform the uh, the mind control based on the belief systems to come. Okay, and that's where we get, for example, the talk about Saint Patrick banishing the serpents, as if the serpents were something evil, which of course is one of the fallacies we've been told by monotheism. Okay, the whole dualism between good and evil, and devaluating serpents and dragons, devaluating women as leaders that were present for such a long time through the Maggian times, okay, as druidesses, owners of land, as queens, and even commanders of of warfare activities. Okay, there are many cases in history about this. Okay, so basically this is the function that the Holy See performed. Now, moving ahead a little, uh, we must make a brief analysis about the powers that were combined under the the caravels of the Columbine voyage, okay, the so-called Nina, Pita, and Santa Maria. And by now, okay, to conclude in a conclusion mode, I will simply tell you that Columbus was, after he had made the deal with the uh, the Spanish crown, Queen Isabella of Castile, right? And after being tested by the Jesuit college or even aristocratic authorities, okay, that were kind of testing the salesman ability to think and knowledge in the utmost degree, okay, with all these stories of monsters in the ocean being uncrossable, and the savages in the other side of the ocean. Well, to resume, all of this misinformation is simply to hide the earlier and very extent and very long navigational experience between the Fenians or the Arcadians, okay, uh, and the land that was called at the time Amaraca, referring to the if I'm not mistaken, to the Maya Quetzalcoatl, right, the winged serpent. Okay, another incredible Maggian-based civilization of spiritual bases. Okay, with with many legendary stories of transcendence, of ascension. Okay, including the invention or the production of a Christ-like being that was painted as as in the pattern of the Fenians, okay, which in the case is blonde, blue eyes, tall, or ginger, okay, just as the natives of the Yucatan, when seeing the Spaniards, thought that the Fenians were returning because they were more or less similar in in their looks. Okay, so of course we've been given misinformation also, that we were told that the Aztecs thought they were gods, blah blah blah. No, this is simply to conceal the same the same issue that the Spanish crown, the royals, the aristocrats were trying to conceal, which is this transit between Europe, right, in the Ireland, the Iberian Peninsula, and the Mediterranean was already done centuries, if not millennia ago, by these Maggian-based orders, including the Valley of Kemet, okay, that later became Egypt. And this transit was known, the interchange was known, all of this was known, okay. Was a very powerful exchange that confederated the Arcadians, the Sons of the Bear, the Kemits, right, the civilization extended through the Nile Valley, and many natives of Amaraca, like in the Yucatan, in the regions they found the Serpent Mounds and all the cromlechs and dolmens, okay. And Colin McGarry will say even into the Inca region, way further ahead near the Pacific, where they found the Ogham alphabet, which is a Druidical Irish kind of alphabet. Okay? Well, so for now we're gonna wrap it up here, okay? And soon we will uh, proceed and follow into the subject of how the Holy See, structured by aristocracy, secret societies and orders, bankers, and also the military apparatus, um, structured itself to perform the navigational enterprise that we were taught, that everyone was taught, unfortunately in a misinformation mode. Okay, truth has to be told now. Okay, that this was all misinformation. Okay, and that the elites knew this. Okay, that's why they applied all the campaign for misinformation out of fear. Okay, and the implications of this misinformation when it comes to the truth of the ancient navigational cycle. Okay, which today has been studied so deeply by the works of Barry Fell, America BC, and also a very important, of course, of Conor McDarry, and also a very important video about the transit between the Irish and other peoples with the natives of America, uh, quoted in a video that that I have mentioned in one of these slide pages. Okay, so it's easily accessible, and then we're gonna analyze in a deconstructive way. In other words, we're gonna break down the whole function of the Holy See through its what I may call a triune power, right? The aristocracy, the secret societies and the bankers, and the judicial and military apparatus. Okay, so we will break down this, okay, analyze it further, and I hope you had enjoyed this lecture, right? And it has been instructive for you. Uh, and I hope, of course, that you all may go to the reference guides and the reference literature, which is all available, okay, in a time where obviously the official and prevailing narratives over history and over uh, our Western origins are obviously collapsing and cracking down, and people are making a lot of questions and a lot of inquiries. So I do hope and wish that this lecture and the ones to come will offer substantially an inspiration and a guide for such kind of deconstructive reflection. Okay, and it did satisfy you and give enjoyment. Okay, for further lectures to come. So thank you very much, and see you in the next lecture.